The rain started before the mistake. Not heavy enough to flood the gutters or chase people indoors, just steady enough to soften the city's edges. Streetlights bled into the wet pavement. Headlights smeared into pale ribbons. Every shadow looked like it could be something else if you stared too long. Officer Daniel Reyes noticed the black sedan because it hesitated, not dramatically, not in a way that screamed guilty. Just a half-second pause at the intersection, like the driver had been deciding between two directions and chose the one that required less explaining. Most people wouldn't have clocked it. Reyes did. 12 years on patrol had trained his eyes to watch what didn't happen as much as what did. The sudden stop, the quick glance, the too-perfect signal, the small decisions people made when they believed nobody was paying attention. The sedan slid into the right lane. The brake light flickered once, then again. Then went dark. Reyes exhaled slowly through his nose. A faulty taillight, a minor violation. The kind of stop that should end with a warning and a nod. Routine. But routine was a word that lived in training manuals, not in real life. He watched the sedan for another beat, letting the distance settle. The road was mostly empty, late enough that only night shift workers and people who didn't want to be seen were still moving through the city. Reyes reached up and flipped on his lights. Red and blue cut through the rain like sudden lightning, painting the wet street in frantic color. The sedan pulled over immediately. No drifting, no slow roll, no dramatic brake. Just a clean, controlled stop against the curb as if it had been expecting him. That tiny tightening returned in Reyes's chest. Not fear, not exactly. Something closer to alertness. The quiet internal voice that said, "Pay attention." He parked behind it at a safe angle, stepped out, and let the cold hit his face. Rain dotted his eyelashes. The air smelled like wet concrete and exhaust. As he walked up, he scanned the rear window. Tinted. Not illegal, just dark enough to hide detail. He adjusted his stance, one hand near his belt, the other loose, calm posture, calm voice. That was the job. The driver's window rolled down before Reyes even reached it. That caught his attention. Most people waited for the officer to speak. Most people let tension build in the uncertainty. This driver anticipated. Inside sat a black man, mid-40s or older, clean, understated jacket, shirt collar visible beneath it. No flashy jewelry, no dramatic accessories, just quiet neatness, the kind that didn't beg to be noticed but didn't apologize for existing either. His hands rested on the steering wheel, relaxed but deliberate. He looked directly at Reyes, not with defiance, not with fear, with presence. "Evening," Reyes said, voice firm but even. "Evening, officer," the man replied. His voice was steady, warm without being friendly, calm without being passive. Reyes kept his eyes on the driver's hands for half a second longer, then let them travel to the man's face. The eyes were alert, not anxious, not glassy, not trying to charm, just watching. "Reason for the stop," Reyes said. "Your taillight is malfunctioning, flickering out." The man glanced briefly toward his rearview mirror as if checking something he already knew. "I appreciate you letting me know," he said. No argument, no annoyance, no explanation. Most people offered something, an excuse, a complaint, a story. This man offered none. Reyes waited for the usual follow-up questions. Nothing. Only quiet patience. "License and registration, please." The man nodded once and moved slowly, hands always visible. His motions were careful, almost ceremonial. Not the shaky carefulness of someone scared, more like the practiced carefulness of someone who understood exactly how this moment was supposed to look. He opened the glove compartment with 2 fingers, retrieved the papers, and handed them over without fumbling. Reyes glanced down. Name, address, standard information. Nothing immediately recognizable. Still, something about the name tugged at him, like a memory just behind a closed door. He kept his face neutral, "I'll be right back." The man nodded again. No sigh, no eye roll, no complaint. Reyes walked back to his patrol car, rain gathering on his shoulders. He sat, shut the door, and entered the information into the system. The computer screen glowed against the darkness. Processing. The wipers moved with steady rhythm. He looked up through the windshield at the sedan. The driver sat perfectly still. Not on his phone, not turning around, not shifting nervously. Just waiting, eyes forward, hands resting lightly now in his lap. Like someone who understood patience, wasn't passive. The system returned the result. Clean record. No warrants, no alerts, no flags, nothing. Reyes stared at the screen a moment longer than he needed to. Clean should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like a question. He glanced at the sedan again. The rain blurred its edges, but the stillness inside it didn't blur at all. It felt intentional. Reyes checked the time on the dashboard clock. The stop had already gone longer than most taillight stops, mostly because he hadn't been able to shake that subtle sense of imbalance. He took a breath. This was simple. He told himself it was simple because he needed it to be. He stepped back into the rain, walked up to the driver's window again, and held the documents in one hand. "Everything came back clear," Reyes said. The man's expression didn't change, as if he'd expected that outcome. "Good," he replied. Reyes handed the papers back. The man accepted them with the same calm precision. "You're going to want to get that taillight fixed," Reyes added. "It could get you pulled over again." "I will," the man said. "First thing." Reyes should have ended it there. He should have said drive safe and walked away. Instead, he hesitated, not because of suspicion, because of curiosity, and because a quiet part of him had begun to feel like he was missing something important, something sitting in plain sight. "Where are you headed tonight?" Reyes asked. Routine question. Standard. Unremarkable. The man paused just long enough that Reyes noticed the pause. "Home," he said. Short answer. Precise. Reyes watched his face for a flicker of annoyance. None came. "Long night?" Reyes asked. The man's mouth shifted slightly. Not quite a smile. Not quite a grimace. "They all are," he said. "In their own way." The words landed heavier than they should have. Reyes blinked once. "That's a philosophical answer," he said carefully. The man met his eyes. "Sometimes the simple answers are the heavy ones." Another sentence that sounded like it belonged somewhere else. Somewhere quieter than the side of a wet road with emergency lights flashing. Reyes felt that internal voice again. "Pay attention." He adjusted his stance, keeping his tone neutral. "You from around here?" "Yes," the man replied. "I've been here a long time." "What do you do?" Reyes asked. The question came out smoother than he expected, his voice steady, his face controlled. Inside, curiosity had shifted into something sharper. The man looked forward for a moment, as if the rain-blurred street held the answer. Then he looked back at Reyes. "I help people," he said. Reyes exhaled softly. "That's pretty broad." "It has to be," the man answered, as if stating a fact of weather. "People are broad." Reyes studied him. The calm didn't feel rehearsed. It felt earned. And that made Reyes uneasy in a way he couldn't explain. He dealt with angry drivers, nervous drivers, fake friendly drivers. People who tried to talk their way out of consequences, people who refused to say anything at all. This man spoke like he had nothing to prove, like he had all the time in the world. "Do you know why I'm asking?" Reyes said. The man's eyes remained steady. "You're trying to play something," he said. Reyes felt the words land like a small weight dropping into his gut. "What makes you say that?" Reyes asked. The man didn't rush his reply, because he didn't have to. "Because you came back the second time," he said calmly. "And the taillight isn't what's holding you here." Reyes went still, not visibly, not dramatically. But inside him, something tightened. The man had spoken the thought Reyes hadn't admitted to himself. There it was, the first real shift. A simple stop. 2 men in the rain, and the driver had just named the truth before the officer could. Reyes kept his voice even. "Is there something I should know?" he asked. The man's expression softened, not pity, not amusement, something quieter. "Maybe," he said, "a beat. Or maybe you already know it, and you're deciding what to do with it." Reyes stared at him, rain pattering on his sleeves, red and blue light washing over both of their faces like a heartbeat. He should have ended it. He should have walked away. But he didn't. Because now the stop wasn't about a tail light. It was about that feeling Reyes couldn't explain, like he'd stepped into a moment that would matter later, whether he wanted it to or not. Reyes drew a slow breath. "I'm going to ask you a few more questions," he said. The man nodded almost gently. "Of course you are." And in that instant, Officer Daniel Reyes realized something he didn't yet have words for. This man wasn't trying to avoid the moment. He was letting it happen, like he'd been here before, like he knew exactly what the next few minutes could become. Rain fell steadily. The city kept moving, and the simple stop quietly crossed a line that neither of them could see until it was already behind them. Rain slid down the roof of the sedan in slow, steady lines. The flashing lights painted everything in pulses of red and blue, turning the quiet street into something unreal, like a scene suspended outside of normal time. Officer Daniel Reyes stood beside the open window, aware that the moment had shifted, but unsure exactly when it had happened. He had asked for more questions, the man had agreed, and now the silence between them felt heavier than any words. Reyes adjusted his stance slightly, grounding himself in routine. Procedure had rhythm. Questions had structure. Structure meant control. "So," Reyes said, voice calm, "you mentioned helping people. What does that look like day to day?" The man rested one elbow lightly against the doorframe, posture relaxed. "It depends on the day," he replied. "Some days it's listening. Some days it's decisions." "Decisions about what?" The man's gaze flickered briefly toward the rain-blurred street ahead before returning to Reyes. "About consequences," he said simply. Reyes felt a small shift inside him. The answer wasn't evasive. It was just wide, like a door opened into a room too large to see clearly from where he stood. "You work for the city?" Reyes asked. "Sometimes," the man said. The same word again. Sometimes. Reyes noticed it immediately. Words mattered. Patterns mattered. "You choose your answers carefully," Reyes said. A faint smile touched the man's face. "So do you." Reyes almost laughed, but stopped himself. The response wasn't defensive. It felt more like observation. The rain intensified slightly, tapping against metal and glass like fingers drumming. Cars passed occasionally, slowing as drivers glanced toward the flashing lights before continuing on. "What's your name?" Reyes asked. The man gave it again, calmly, the same way he had when handing over the license. Hearing it spoken felt different, heavier somehow. Reyes repeated it quietly, testing the sound. That flicker of familiarity returned, like hearing a song you know but can't quite place. "Have we met before?" Reyes asked. The man tilted his head slightly, considering. "Not directly," he said. Not directly. Reyes felt the weight of that phrase settle into his thoughts. What does that mean? "It means," the man said, "that sometimes people know of each other without realizing it." Reyes watched him carefully. The calm didn't break, the tone didn't shift, but something beneath it felt intentional. "Are you saying you know who I am?" Reyes asked. The man didn't answer immediately. He glanced at the badge on Reyes's chest, not in a way that felt invasive, just acknowledging its presence. "I know enough," he said. A quiet pulse of tension moved through Reyes. Enough for what? He resisted the urge to push harder. Instead, he changed direction. "Why were you hesitating at the intersection back there?" he asked. The man's eyes softened slightly, as if surprised by the shift. "I was deciding whether to take a different route," he said. "Why?" A small pause. "Sometimes you sense when something important is about to happen," the man replied, "even if you don't know what it is." The words settled between them. Reyes felt a strange echo of his own thoughts from earlier, the same instinct that had made him watch the sedan a moment longer than necessary. "You think this is important?" Reyes asked. The man met his gaze fully now. "I think every interaction has the potential to be," he said. Reyes exhaled slowly. The conversation felt less like questioning and more like peeling back layers. He shifted his weight again, rain soaking deeper into his uniform. "You're very calm," Reyes said. "I've learned that calm helps people think clearly," the man replied. "And you think I'm not thinking clearly?" "I think you're thinking deeply," the man said gently. "Those aren't the same thing." Reyes blinked. That answer landed differently than he expected. Not criticism, not praise, just clarity. He glanced briefly toward his patrol car, grounding himself in the reality of flashing lights and radio static. He reminded himself that he was still the officer here, still responsible for the interaction, still in control, but control felt less solid than usual. "Step out of the vehicle for me," Reyes said. The man nodded immediately. No hesitation. He opened the door slowly and stepped into the rain, standing straight but relaxed. Up close, Reyes noticed small details, the way the man carried himself, the quiet steadiness in his breathing, the lack of tension in his shoulders. It didn't feel like compliance. It felt like participation. Reyes moved slightly to the side, maintaining awareness of surroundings while keeping the man in view. "Is something wrong?" the man asked calmly. "No," Reyes said quickly. "Just continuing the stop." The man nodded. They stood facing each other now, equal height, equal stillness. For a moment, neither spoke. The rain filled the silence. "You ever feel," the man said suddenly, "like a moment is bigger than it looks?" Reyes hesitated. "That depends," he said carefully. "On what?" "On whether you know the whole story," Reyes replied. The man smiled faintly. "Sometimes you only understand the story after it ends." Reyes studied him. The familiarity tugged again, stronger now. He searched his memory for a place, a face, a context. Nothing surfaced clearly, but the feeling remained. "Have you been stopped before?" Reyes asked. "Yes," the man said. And every time is different," he replied. "Because every person is different." Reyes nodded slowly. The answer felt obvious, but the way he said it carried weight. "Do you think I'm doing something wrong?" Reyes asked quietly. The question surprised him as soon as it left his mouth. The man shook his head gently. "No," he said. "I think you're being honest." "Honest about what?" The man looked at him steadily. "About the fact that you're still deciding what this moment means." Reyes felt a small chill run through him despite the rain. Because that was true. More true than he wanted to admit. He wasn't just finishing a traffic stop anymore. He was trying to understand why he couldn't let it end. The radio crackled faintly from his patrol car, reminding him that the world outside this moment still existed. Reyes glanced toward it, then back at the man. "Is there something you're not telling me?" he asked. The man took a slow breath. "There's always something we don't know about each other," he said. "That's not an answer." "It's the only honest one," the man replied softly. The rain fell harder, red and blue lights reflected in puddles at their feet. And standing there, watching this stranger who felt strangely familiar, Reyes realized the conversation had moved far beyond protocol. He wasn't just asking questions anymore. He was searching. And the man seemed willing to wait as long as it took for him to find what he was looking for. The rain had settled into a steady rhythm now, falling like a curtain between the two men and the rest of the world. Officer Daniel Reyes became aware of how long they had been standing there, longer than a normal stop. Long enough that the flashing lights no longer felt urgent, just constant. The man stood calmly beside his car, hands visible, posture relaxed. No tension in his shoulders, no impatience in his eyes. It should have made things easier. Instead, it made Reyes more alert. Because calm could mean many things: confidence, experience, or certainty. And certainty made people unpredictable. "You said every interaction is different," Reyes said finally. "What makes this one different?" The man didn't answer immediately. He watched a car pass slowly, headlights cutting through the rain before fading into darkness. "You stayed," he said at last. Reyes frowned slightly. "I'm the officer," he replied. "That's my job." "Yes," the man said gently, "but you stayed after the job was finished." The words landed quietly but firmly. Reyes felt something tighten inside his chest, because he knew the man was right. He had already handed back the documents. He had already issued the warning. The stop should have ended, and yet he was still here. "Maybe I just want to make sure everything's all right," Reyes said. The man nodded. "That's part of it." Part of it. The phrase lingered. Reyes crossed his arms loosely, rain dripping from his sleeves. "And the rest?" The man met his eyes. "You're trying to understand a feeling," he said. Reyes exhaled slowly. He didn't deny it, because denying it would have been a lie. Silence stretched between them again, but this time it felt different. Less like uncertainty, more like anticipation. Reyes shifted his weight slightly. "You said earlier that you work with systems," he said. "What kind of systems?" The man glanced at the patrol car, then back at Reyes. "People systems," he replied. "That's still broad." The man smiled faintly. "Broad things often carry the most responsibility." Reyes watched him carefully. The way he spoke felt deliberate, not evasive, but measured, as if he were choosing words that mattered. "You speak like someone used to being listened to," Reyes said. The man didn't react immediately. "That happens sometimes," he replied. Reyes felt the imbalance more strongly now. It wasn't visible, it wasn't aggressive, but it was there. The conversation felt guided. Not controlled exactly, but shaped, like water flowing along a path that had already been carved. "You ever been in law enforcement?" Reyes asked. The man shook his head. "No." "But you understand it," Reyes pressed. "I understand people who carry responsibility," the man said. Another answer that felt bigger than the question. Reyes ran a hand briefly across the back of his neck, rain soaking into his collar. The quiet of the night pressed in around them. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. A car engine hummed as it passed, life moving on while this moment stretched longer and longer. "You don't seem nervous," Reyes said. "I don't feel threatened," the man replied calmly. Reyes nodded slowly. "That's good." The man studied him for a moment. "You're careful," he said. "It's part of the job." "No," the man said gently. "I mean emotionally." Reyes blinked. That wasn't a direction he expected. "I don't know what you mean," he said. The man tilted his head slightly. "You keep your voice neutral," he said. "You listen before reacting. You're watching yourself as much as you're watching me." Reyes felt a flicker of surprise. Most people didn't notice that. Or if they did, they didn't say it out loud. "You're very observant," Reyes said. "I've had practice," the man replied. Another phrase that carried weight. Reyes studied him again. The familiarity grew stronger. Not a memory exactly, more like a sense of recognition that refused to fully form. "Have you ever had someone misread you?" Reyes asked. The question came out softer than he intended. The man smiled slightly. "Every day." "And how do you deal with that?" I try to understand what they see, he said, even if it isn't the whole picture. Reyes absorbed that. It felt honest, real, not rehearsed. You think I'm misreading you? Reyes asked quietly. The man considered the question carefully. I think you're trying not to, he said. The answer surprised Reyes because it felt like acknowledgement instead of correction. Rain fell harder for a moment, drumming against the roof of the sedan. Reyes glanced briefly down the street, scanning automatically, then returned his focus to the man. Why did you say earlier that you know enough about me? Reyes asked. The man's gaze softened. I pay attention, he said simply. To what? To how people carry themselves, he replied. To the choices they make when no one is pushing them. Reyes felt the words settle into him. He thought about how he had chosen to stay, how he had chosen to ask more questions, how he couldn't explain why. You keep talking like this moment matters, Reyes said. The man nodded. Doesn't it? Reyes hesitated. He searched for a quick answer and found none, because deep down he felt it too. Something about this stop felt larger than the situation itself. Not dramatic, not dangerous, just significant. He took a slow breath. You ever feel like you're being evaluated? Reyes asked suddenly. The man didn't smile, didn't laugh. He simply held Reyes's gaze. Sometimes evaluation is just another word for understanding, he said. Reyes felt the imbalance sharpen. The roles felt less clear now, less officer and driver, more two people standing at the edge of something unspoken. The radio crackled faintly from the patrol car again. Reyes ignored it for a moment longer, because leaving now felt like walking away from a question he hadn't finished asking. And for the first time that night, he wondered if the man knew exactly when that realization had happened. The rain softened again, settling into a quiet rhythm that made everything feel slower. Officer Daniel Reyes stood facing the man beside the black sedan, aware that something invisible had shifted between them. Not a loss of authority, not a challenge, something else. Balance. That was the word that came to him. The interaction no longer felt one-sided, and that unsettled him more than open resistance ever could. He glanced briefly toward his patrol car, red and blue lights reflecting off the wet asphalt like a heartbeat. You said earlier that people behave differently depending on what they think they know, Reyes said. The man nodded slightly. Yes. What do you think I know? Reyes asked. The man paused, not hesitating, considering. You believe you're searching for a reason to stay, he said finally. But you're really searching for recognition. Reyes blinked. Recognition. The word hit deeper than expected. Recognition of what? Reyes asked. The man studied him quietly. Of something familiar, he said. Reyes felt that pull again. The half-memory just out of reach. The man's face, his voice, something he had encountered before, indirectly or otherwise. But nothing came into focus. You keep talking like you understand me, Reyes said. I understand patterns, the man replied. And I'm a pattern? We all are. Reyes exhaled slowly, rain dripping from his chin. He realized he had stopped thinking about the taillight entirely. This was no longer about procedure. It was about the space between two people trying to understand each other without fully saying it. You ever worry about being misunderstood? Reyes asked. The man gave a quiet, thoughtful smile. Only when misunderstanding leads to harm. That sounds like experience talking. It usually is. Reyes watched him carefully, the way he stood, the way he listened. Nothing rushed, nothing forced, like he trusted silence to do half the work. Most people filled silence with nervous energy. This man allowed it to breathe. You don't seem surprised by any of this, Reyes said. The man shook his head gently. People reveal themselves when they slow down, he said. Most moments move too fast for that to happen. Reyes felt a strange sense of exposure. Not uncomfortable, just seen. He shifted his stance slightly. "You said earlier that you've been on both sides of conversations like this," Reyes said. "What did you mean?" The man looked down briefly at the wet pavement before answering. "I've been in situations where roles mattered," he said, "and situations where they didn't." "That sounds like a careful answer." "It's an honest one." Reyes nodded slowly. He found himself choosing his words more carefully now, too. Not because he felt pressured, because the moment felt important enough to deserve precision. "You ever think about how thin the line is?" Reyes asked. "Between what?" "Between doing your job and something else." The man's expression softened. "Yes," he said quietly. "I think about that often." Reyes swallowed. He wasn't sure why he had said that out loud. Maybe because the conversation had drifted somewhere deeper than he expected. Maybe because the rain and the flashing lights made the world feel smaller. Or maybe because the man listened in a way that made honesty feel safe. "What's the hardest part of helping people?" Reyes asked. The man didn't answer right away. His eyes moved briefly toward the dark street, then back to Reyes. "Accepting that you don't always know the whole story," he said. Reyes nodded slowly. "That applies here too, I guess." "It applies everywhere." Another silence settled between them. But this one felt different. Less uncertain, more reflective. Reyes realized he wasn't just asking questions anymore. He was talking, sharing, and that wasn't typical for him during a stop. "You know," Reyes said, "most people either get defensive or try to leave as fast as possible." The man smiled faintly. "I've learned that leaving too quickly can make you miss something important." Reyes let out a small breath that almost felt like a laugh. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I'm starting to understand that." The man studied him carefully. "You carry yourself like someone who takes responsibility seriously," he said. Reyes shrugged slightly. "That's part of the badge." "Not always," the man said gently. "Sometimes it's part of the person." The words lingered longer than expected. Reyes felt something shift inside him, something quieter than pride, acknowledgement, and that made him uncomfortable in a way he couldn't explain. "You keep saying things that sound like lessons," Reyes said. The man chuckled softly. "Maybe I just talk too much." "No," Reyes said. "You talk like someone used to being heard." The man didn't respond immediately. For a moment, the rain filled the space between them. Then he said quietly, "Being heard doesn't mean being understood." Reyes nodded. "That's true." They stood there, two figures illuminated by flashing lights, the city moving quietly around them. Reyes realized something then. The stop had become a mirror. Every question he asked seemed to turn back toward him. Every observation revealed something about both of them. And for the first time that night, he wondered if the man had sensed this from the very beginning. He took a slow breath. "Why do I feel like this moment matters more than it should?" Reyes asked. The man's answer came gently. "Because sometimes the smallest moments carry the biggest meaning." Reyes watched him, searching for the piece he was missing. The familiarity tugged stronger now, almost there, just beyond reach. And the feeling that something important was about to surface hung quietly in the air between them. The rain slowed to a thin mist, soft enough that the flashing lights began to feel brighter against the darkness. Officer Daniel Reyes became aware of how quiet the street had grown. No passing cars for several seconds, no footsteps, just the faint hum of distant traffic and the steady rhythm of his own breathing. The moment felt suspended, like the city itself had stepped back to watch. He shifted slightly, adjusting his stance, grounding himself again in the physical world. The man stood calmly in front of him, posture open, expression thoughtful. Nothing about him suggested urgency. Nothing about him suggested fear. And that continued to unsettle Reyes more than anything else. "You ever notice," Reyes said slowly, How some conversations feel longer than they actually are? The man nodded. Time stretches when something matters, he said. Reyes let out a quiet breath. That's exactly what this feels like. The man didn't respond immediately. Instead, he watched Reyes carefully, as if waiting for something deeper to surface. Reyes felt it again, that sense of familiarity pulling at him from somewhere just beyond memory. He searched for a connection, a meeting, a briefing, a face seen in passing. Nothing clear. But the feeling refused to leave. You said earlier, you've been around situations where roles mattered, Reyes said. What kind of situations? The man took a moment before answering. The kind where people carry responsibility for others, he said. That still sounds broad. It is. Reyes nodded slowly. You're careful about how much you reveal. I try to be honest without overwhelming the moment, the man replied. Reyes absorbed that. Honest without overwhelming. It sounded intentional, measured. You don't seem surprised by anything I've said tonight, Reyes observed. The man shook his head slightly. No, he said, because most people want to be understood more than they want to be right. Reyes raised an eyebrow. That's a strong statement. It's a quiet truth, the man replied. Reyes felt himself leaning into the conversation more than he realized. He wasn't interrogating anymore. He was listening. And that realization struck him harder than he expected. You said you work with consequences, Reyes said. What does that actually mean? The man's gaze shifted briefly toward the patrol car, then back. It means I spend time thinking about how small moments shape larger outcomes. Reyes felt something inside him tighten, because that sounded exactly like what this stop had become. A small moment stretching toward something larger. Do you ever regret decisions you've made? Reyes asked. The man smiled faintly. Only the ones where I didn't listen enough. The answer felt personal, honest. Reyes nodded slowly. That's fair. Silence settled again, but it felt less heavy now, more focused, like the conversation had moved closer to something real. You know, Reyes said quietly, most stops don't turn into this. The man chuckled softly. I gathered that. So why this one? Reyes asked. The man looked at him steadily. Because you chose to stay. The words landed firmly. Reyes exhaled slowly. He couldn't argue with that. You keep putting that on me, Reyes said. The man tilted his head slightly. I'm just describing what happened. Reyes thought about it. He could have ended the stop earlier. He could have walked away. But something had kept him here. Something he couldn't fully explain. You ever feel like someone recognizes you before you recognize them? Reyes asked suddenly. The man's expression softened. Yes, he said quietly. And? It usually means the connection matters more than you realize. Reyes felt the familiarity sharpen again, stronger than before. He studied the man's face carefully now, the eyes, the posture, the voice. Pieces began to shift in his memory, though they hadn't yet locked into place. Have you spoken publicly before? Reyes asked. The man hesitated briefly. Yes, he said. The simple admission sent a ripple through Reyes's thoughts. Public speaking, recognition, oversight. The fragments hovered just out of reach. You're not just someone passing through, Reyes said slowly. The man met his gaze. No, he said. Reyes felt the air change slightly. A subtle crack in the surface of the conversation, not a reveal, but a shift toward one. What do you mean when you say you help people understand consequences? Reyes asked. The man's voice grew quieter. I help people reflect on decisions, he said. Sometimes after they've already been made. Reyes felt a small chill run through him, because suddenly the conversation felt less theoretical, more personal. You're talking about me right now, aren't you? Reyes asked. The man didn't answer immediately. He held Reyes's gaze with steady calm. "I'm talking about both of us," he said. The honesty in the statement caught Reyes off guard. He expected deflection. He received inclusion instead. The rain misted lightly around them. The flashing lights reflected in small puddles near their feet. Reyes realized something then. He wasn't uncomfortable. He wasn't defensive. He was curious, deeply curious. And that curiosity felt like the edge of something important. "You keep saying this moment matters," Reyes said. "What happens if it doesn't?" The man smiled gently. "Then we both go home," he said, "and nothing changes." "And if it does?" The man took a slow breath. "Then maybe one of us sees something differently tomorrow." Reyes felt the words settle inside him, not heavy, just real. He studied the man again, searching for that missing piece. The recognition felt closer now, almost within reach, and with it came the quiet sense that the conversation was approaching a turning point, a moment where something long hidden would finally come into focus. The rain had nearly stopped. Only a faint mist hung in the air now, catching the glow of the streetlights and turning everything soft around the edges. Officer Daniel Reyes felt the shift before anything was said, the kind of shift that comes when a conversation reaches its edge, when both people sense that the next words will change the shape of everything that came before. The man stood quietly, hands relaxed, gaze steady. Nothing in his posture suggested urgency, but something in the silence suggested inevitability. Reyes took a slow breath. He realized he was no longer thinking about protocol or timing or how long the stop had lasted. He was thinking about understanding, about that feeling that had followed him since he first noticed the hesitation at the intersection. "You said earlier that sometimes people recognize each other without realizing it," Reyes said. The man nodded. "Yes," Reyes hesitated. The familiarity had grown stronger with every minute. It hovered just beyond clarity, like a word on the tip of his tongue. "I keep feeling like I should know you," Reyes admitted. The man's expression softened slightly. "That happens sometimes," he said. "That's not really an answer," Reyes replied quietly. The man smiled faintly, not dismissive, almost patient. "No," he said, "it's just honest." Reyes studied him carefully now. The voice, the posture, the calm certainty. Pieces began sliding into place. He searched his memory again, briefings, training sessions, departmental meetings, community forums. And then something clicked. Not fully, just enough to create a crack in the wall. "You've spoken to officers before," Reyes said slowly. "Yes," the man replied. "In training?" "Sometimes." Reyes felt his pulse pick up slightly. "You're connected to the department somehow." The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he watched Reyes closely, as if allowing him the space to arrive at the truth himself. The silence stretched. Reyes's thoughts moved quickly now, assembling fragments. Community panels, oversight meetings, internal discussions about policy changes. A face on a projection screen. A voice asking careful questions. A man standing at the front of a room filled with uniforms, speaking calmly about responsibility and perception. Reyes's eyes widened slightly. "You're—" he started, then stopped. The man waited. Not pushing, not correcting, just present. Reyes exhaled slowly. "You're involved with oversight," he said finally. The man nodded once. "Yes." The words settled into the space between them. Everything shifted quietly. The conversation rewrote itself in Reyes's mind. Every question, every observation, every moment of calm. He felt a brief surge of self-consciousness, followed quickly by something else. Relief. Because the familiarity finally had a place to land. "You could have said that earlier," Reyes said. The man tilted his head slightly. "I could have. Why didn't you?" The man looked out toward the wet street for a moment before answering. Because people behave differently when they know titles, he said. I wanted to meet you without that layer. Reyes absorbed that slowly. Part of him bristled at the idea. Another part understood it completely. So this was a test? Reyes asked. The man shook his head gently. No, he said. Life doesn't need tests. Moments just reveal things. Reyes nodded slowly. He thought about every decision he had made since turning on the lights, every tone of voice, every question. He didn't feel judged. He felt seen. And that realization carried unexpected weight. You've seen officers at their worst, Reyes said quietly. Yes, the man replied. And at their best? The man's expression softened further. Yes, Reyes hesitated. Where do I fall? The question slipped out before he could stop it. The man didn't answer immediately. He studied Reyes carefully, as if measuring something deeper than words. You stayed, he said finally. That's not an answer. It is, the man replied gently. Most people rush past moments that make them uncomfortable. You didn't. Reyes felt a small warmth rise in his chest. Not pride, something quieter, recognition. So, what happens now? Reyes asked. The man smiled slightly. Now we finish the interaction. Reyes almost laughed. The simplicity of it broke through the heaviness. He nodded. Right, he said. He glanced at the sedan, then back at the man. Your taillight still needs fixing. I'll take care of it, the man said. Reyes handed him back the final paperwork, though it felt almost symbolic now. The practical part of the stop returning after the deeper conversation had unfolded. They stood there for another moment, neither rushing to end it. You know, Reyes said, this is probably the strangest stop I've had. The man chuckled softly. Sometimes the strangest moments are the most honest. Reyes nodded. He felt something settle inside him, a quiet understanding that this interaction would stay with him long after the rain stopped and the lights turned off. Not because of authority, not because of oversight, because of connection. He stepped back slightly. Well, he said, drive safe. The man opened the car door, then paused. He looked back at Reyes, eyes steady. You already are, he said. Then he got into the car. The engine started. The sedan pulled away slowly, merging into the wet street until its taillights disappeared into the distance. Reyes stood there for a moment longer, watching the empty road. The rain stopped completely, and the quiet that followed felt different than before, like something had shifted inside him, subtle but permanent. The flashing lights faded as Officer Daniel Reyes turned them off. Red and blue disappeared from the pavement, leaving only the soft glow of streetlights reflecting on wet asphalt. For the first time since the stop began, the night felt ordinary again. But Reyes didn't. He stood beside his patrol car for a moment longer, watching the empty stretch of road where the black sedan had vanished. The silence pressed in differently now, not heavy, not tense, just thoughtful. He walked back to the driver's seat and closed the door behind him. The interior felt smaller than before, the quiet hum of the engine filling the space where conversation had been. He rested his hands on the steering wheel without starting to drive. The man's words replayed in his mind. You stayed. It sounded simple, but it didn't feel simple. Reyes leaned back slightly, staring through the windshield at the wet street ahead. He had conducted hundreds, maybe thousands of stops during his career. Most blurred together over time, faces faded, voices disappeared. Moments lost their sharp edges. This one felt different. Not because of who the man was, because of what the interaction had revealed. Reyes realized he had spent most of his career focusing on control of situations, control of tone, control of outcomes. Tonight, control had shifted into something else, awareness. He thought about the moment when he could have walked away, when the stop had technically ended. He had paused, chosen to stay, not out of suspicion, out of instinct, and that choice had changed everything. The radio crackled softly, breaking the quiet. "Unit 24, status?" Reyes picked up the mic automatically. "24, all clear," he said. His voice sounded steady, normal. But inside, something felt newly unsettled, not in a negative way. More like a lens had been adjusted. He pulled slowly back onto the road. The tires moved through shallow puddles, water spraying softly behind him. The city continued, as it always had. People walking beneath umbrellas, lights glowing in apartment windows, life moving forward without noticing that something small had shifted inside one person driving through it. He passed the intersection where he had first seen the sedan. The hesitation replayed in his mind. He realized now that the hesitation had not only belonged to the driver, it had belonged to him too, a subconscious moment of recognition before understanding. Reyes drove slowly, scanning the streets automatically, but his thoughts drifted back to the conversation, the way the man had listened, the way he had answered without rushing, the way silence had felt like part of the dialogue instead of something to avoid. Most interactions felt like a race toward conclusion. This one had felt like permission to pause. He wondered how many moments he had moved past too quickly before, how many conversations ended before they began. The thought wasn't heavy, just curious. He stopped at a red light, watching rainwater drip from a nearby awning. A pedestrian crossed slowly, hands in pockets, head down against the lingering mist. Reyes felt an unexpected sense of calm settle into him. Not relief, not pride, just clarity. He realized something then. The man had never told him how to think, had never corrected him, had never challenged his authority. He had simply been present, and somehow that presence had created space for reflection. The light turned green. Reyes drove forward. As he moved through the city, he noticed details more sharply. The way a couple laughed beneath an umbrella, the way a taxi slowed to pick someone up, the glow of a late-night diner sign reflecting on the pavement. Everything looked the same, but it felt different. He reached for the radio again, adjusting the volume lower. The quiet felt important. He thought about the question he had asked. "Where do I fall?" The man's answer returned gently. "You stayed." Reyes understood now that the answer had never been about judgment. It had been about choice. The choice to slow down. The choice to listen. The choice to see beyond the obvious. He pulled into a side street, pausing briefly as he watched the rain finally fade into nothing. The sky cleared just enough for the streetlights to shine brighter, and for the first time that night, he smiled slightly. Not because he felt changed, because he felt aware of change, subtle, quiet, but real. He started driving again, ready to continue the shift, ready to return to routine, yet carrying something new, an understanding that even the simplest moments held more weight than they appeared to. The rest of the shift passed without urgency. Calls came in and were cleared. Questions were answered. Miles slipped quietly beneath the tires of the patrol car. But something inside Officer Daniel Reyes moved differently now. Not dramatically, not in a way anyone else would notice. Just enough that the night felt sharper, more intentional. He listened more carefully to voices over the radio. He watched people a little longer before forming conclusions. He allowed silence to exist without rushing to fill it. Near the end of his shift, he parked along a quiet street overlooking a row of closed storefronts. The rain had completely stopped. Water clung to the edges of signs and window frames, catching the first hints of early morning light. Reyes rested his hands loosely on the steering wheel and exhaled slowly. Fatigue settled into his shoulders, but it felt lighter than usual. His mind returned to the stop, not the reveal, not the realization of who the man was, But the space before that, the moments where neither of them knew exactly where the conversation would lead. He thought about how easily he could have missed it, how easily he could have ended the stop with a routine warning and driven away, and how nothing about the world would have looked different. Except him. He turned off the engine. The sudden quiet inside the car felt deeper than silence. Outside, a bird called somewhere in the distance. The city stretched awake slowly, unaware of the conversation that had taken place on a wet street just hours earlier. Reyes leaned back, closing his eyes briefly. He replayed one sentence again. People reveal themselves when they slow down. It sounded simple, but it carried weight now. He realized how often the job demanded speed, quick decisions, quick judgments, quick endings. And yet, tonight had shown him something else. That slowing down didn't weaken authority. Sometimes, it strengthened understanding. He opened his eyes again. The sky had begun to lighten faintly, soft gray replacing deep night. He started the engine and drove toward the station, passing familiar streets that now felt subtly new. When he arrived, the parking lot was half full. Other officers moved toward the entrance, coffee cups in hand, conversations half finished from earlier shifts. Reyes sat for a moment before stepping out. He watched the building quietly. Training sessions, briefings, meetings. He wondered how many times he had sat in rooms where that man had spoken without fully absorbing the weight of the words. Now, those words felt personal, real. He stepped out of the car and walked inside. The hallway smelled faintly of coffee and paper. Normal sounds greeted him. Laughter from a nearby office, the clatter of keyboards, low conversations. Routine. But he carried the night with him like a quiet echo. At his desk, he completed his reports. When he reached the section describing the traffic stop, he paused. The cursor blinked on the screen. He wrote the facts first. Time, location, reason for stop, warning issued, everything accurate, everything straightforward. He hesitated before finishing, not because he didn't know what to write, because he knew that no report could capture what had actually happened, the shift inside him, the quiet understanding that moments mattered even when they looked ordinary. He finished typing and saved the report. Standing up, he stretched slightly and glanced toward the windows. Morning light had fully arrived now, a new day beginning without ceremony. He walked outside again before heading home, breathing in the cool air. The world felt wider somehow, not easier, not simpler, just clearer. He realized then that the stop had not been about oversight or evaluation. It had been about presence, about two people meeting honestly in a moment that could have passed unnoticed. He smiled faintly. Somewhere out there, the man was probably starting his own day, carrying his own thoughts about the interaction. And Reyes understood that neither of them needed to speak again for the moment to matter. He got into his personal car, started the engine, and drove toward home. The streets were busier now, filled with morning traffic and people beginning their routines. Life continued, but inside him, something had shifted quietly, a deeper patience, a willingness to pause, a reminder that the smallest moments often held the greatest weight. As the city passed by outside his window, Reyes realized he would never look at a routine stop the same way again. Because sometimes, a simple stop didn't stay simple. And sometimes, that was exactly what it was meant to be.